Greetings and salutations, my amazing AP kiddos. Here is another presentation about imperialism, since that's kind of still where we are at. This will actually, I'm going to upload this in 2 parts, otherwise it'd be way too long. So we're just going to do a couple quick refreshers, right? We're talking about the age of imperialism. Usually this is kind of considered 1850 to 1914 when you think of new imperialism, right? Old imperialism was colonialism. That was, you know, sending some people over to settle a new land and calling it good. Imperialism is a lot more involved with changing the course of a country's ruling in history, right? So it's a seizure, takeover of a country or territory by a stronger country. And Europeans overall, they tend to do this because industrialization, right? The idea of creating factories and faster systems to create things. And then we've gone from cottage industry to actual factory creation. You need resources for that, right? So in order to make things, you need things. So you're looking for land, and that's perfect to establish a trading post. So it's easier to trade with other countries. Natural resources and raw materials. So if you're running out of stuff in your home country, go to another country and take theirs, right? And also just a new market for products, right? Like we talked about in the last video with King Leopold wanting control of the Congo because he wanted access to the rubber trees. And that was a new product that a lot of people wanted, and it would make him very, very rich. So they wanted to control all aspects of the colonies. It's not like early colonialism or imperialism where they would send a group of people and say, well, just kind of figure it out. Here are your basic parameters, go. In this case, they want to integrate and take over the culture and the country. So they want to be involved in their politics, how their society is run, their economy, culture and customs, right? Because it goes back to that white man's burden a lot of times, trying to civilize the world. Right. So when we look at methods of management, we look at a direct control, right, where they're in there, they're doing things, they're telling everyone what to do, or indirect control, where they choose the person who will be in charge that directly reports to them, but they may not have an actual presence in the country. You can have a colony, right? That's what we are looking at in old imperialism. You can have a protectorate. So that's like, today, that would be like Puerto Rico to the United States. You have spheres of influence, which we'll get into a little bit later in this lecture, where you go into a country and you have a very small, you have control over a small part of that country. And then of course you have economic imperialism, and that's where you have private businesses asserting control. And that was something that happened a lot in Latin America and in Cuba. So we have Europeans wanting to get territory, and for all kinds of things, right? Trade, tobacco, oil, access to the Indian Ocean, any other kind of natural resource. Something we'll see too is America's involved in imperialism. Right, so just a quick refresher, right? Great Britain was ruling India. We have the colonialism. These are all just different parts of like the Pacific that different countries claim. Okay, so our big thing here is Europe expanding and taking over land. They do it for the same old reasons they ever did in the 19th century or the 1800s, right? Was that they wanted things, they needed things, and they felt that they were able to take them. The difference in this century, right, in our 1800s and our 19th century is the extent, okay? So instead of a little bit here or there, imperialism became global in nature, and especially when you talk about Great Britain, they had one of the largest empires in the world by the time they are done, okay? And the other thing with it too is it's contradictory, right? So you have a lot of European nations who are going through their own revolutions. They're going through things like, right, they're adopting ideas of Hobbes and Locke and talking about how, right, natural rights exist for people, and they have the Enlightenment happening and all these Enlightenment era thinkers or these social contract thinkers. But while they're exploring these ideals of being liberal, of nationalism, socialism for their people, imperialism exploits the people right? So for example, in France, you might be having this major transition of thinking about how everyone should be equal, how men all have equal rights, but then France will own a colony in Africa where none of these ideas are practiced or allowed to be practiced. All right, so the first thing we're going to look at is the Eastern question, right? Because also in this Unit 6, we're looking at East Asia, Southeast Asia, Japan, all of these areas that start to be infiltrated and taken over. So in this first part, right, a lot of this, one of the reasons I'm going over it too, is a lot of this is going to lead us into World War I eventually. So what we have is the Eastern question. So we have this area right here, okay, you can see the boot that is Italy, okay? This area is called the Balkans, and there's often a lot of turmoil there because there's a lot of different ethnic groups that are in one area, and so as nationalism rises, each group thinks that they're the one, the best one. All right, so Russia, right, so if this is the Balkans, we've got Russia over here, right? So at the time, Russia has this dream, right? And it starts since Catherine the Great was in charge. They want to take that area back, the Balkans, and in part because, right? So this is like, we're looking at like modern day Turkey and things like that. They want Constantinople, right? Today that's called Istanbul. They want Constantinople because that's the capital of the previous Byzantine Empire, and it's also kind of the holy place for Orthodox Christianity. They also are pushing pan-Slavism, and that's the idea that all people of Slavic descent in Europe should be under one government, and that government should be Russia because they're Slavic. And Russia even defeats the Ottoman Empire in the late 1800s, and that helps them try and navigate closer to taking control of the Balkans again. Okay, so another part of this Eastern question, right, is that Britain is not exactly excited about yielding to Russia, right? So they don't want them to have any more power than possible. So you have them really just ignoring the Russian hegemony. Hegemony is leadership or dominance of another area or social group by a country. All right, so they refuse to accept Russia's hegemony in the Balkans, and they even send in a navy to try and help Turks of the Ottoman Empire defend themselves. Then we have this nationalistic spirit that comes about. It's often called jingoism, right? So jingoism is this like extreme patriotism, right? Especially when you look at like aggressive foreign policy. So the British saying that their way is the best and then wanting to take over other foreign countries, that's jingoism, right? Got a couple of cartoons, right? Bull baiting. Got a couple of people fighting, right? In plain English, we don't want you to have that. And so with these issues, we have the Chancellor of Germany, Otto von Bismarck, who is a character in and of himself, right? He offers to mediate this issue because having some major powers at each other's throats is not good, right? It's not going to be good for Europe as a whole. All right, so this turns into what's called the Congress of Berlin. All right, so the Congress of Berlin, this happens in 1878. Okay, so what we have is, right, Russia, the Ottoman Empire, some other forces in Europe, they get together and they kind of hash out who should have what area. So after this conference, Russia's not very happy because they participate in the conference, but they don't get much out of it, right? They did technically defeat the Turks in battle, so they feel they have access to this land, but they don't get it after this conference, right? We do get recognition of a couple of countries, right? Romania, Serbia, and Montenegro. They're recognized as independent states, so that's good for them, right? We start to get Bulgaria being established as an autonomous principality. Okay, so that means that another country is going to kind of help it out, but they get to make their own decisions. And it's, you know, so it's still going to be in the Ottoman Empire, but they get to rule themselves. Okay, and then Austrians, they gain control of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Okay, and then we get the transfer of Cyprus to Great Britain, which is super close to the Suez Canal, which is very important. So as we're looking at it, right, we've got Bulgaria here. So this is technically still part of the Ottoman Empire. This is the Balkans, right? And the Ottoman Empire keeps this, and Russia's not happy. Okay, and then if I go over here to Cyprus, it's this small island off the coast of like Syria and Turkey. Well, here's the Suez Canal. And Great Britain now has really good access to it. Plus, they're going to be taking control of Egypt soon. So that's going to put them in a really solid trade position. So with the Congress of Berlin, Russia blamed Bismarck, right? They said, this is the guy who put it all together. It's his fault. And this isn't to be confused, right, with the Berlin Conference. The Berlin Conference is in 1885, a few years after this, and that's that scramble for Africa where they carve Africa up and different European powers take control. So here's the thing. It's in red because it's important, right? Russian hostility towards the Germans really kind of effectively kills off the remnants of the Concert of Europe. Okay, so the Concert of Europe is this kind of loosey-goosey agreement between the European monarchies after the Napoleonic Wars, right? So the Napoleonic Wars happening around like 1812, and before and after. You have Napoleon racing his way through Europe, kicking butt, taking names, and gathering a lot of territory. Well, once he's finally defeated and exiled, the monarchies of Europe get together and go, well, that sucked. We don't want that to happen again. But they don't make strong alliances. They just kind of say, yeah, I got your back, you got my back, fantastic. And they leave it at that. And it's important to note that this Congress of Berlin marks the beginning, the end of that kind of loose confederation among European monarchies, because this is what's going to push us towards the eventual division and alliances between European countries that we're going to see in World War I. All right, I will pause here and we'll pick up with our next part in the part 2 of this video.